Good morning and welcome to the press conference introducing the 43rd annual meeting of the World Economic Forum. My name is Adrian Monk. I'm head of communications here at the Forum, and I'm joined in this press conference by founder and executive chair of the World Economic Forum, Professor Klaus Schwab, and by colleagues on the managing board, Alois Schwingi, Borge Brender, Lee Howell, and by the Forum's chief economist, Jennifer Blanker. We'll be hearing from each of them about the individual aspects of this year's program and this year's meeting. But I want to begin by asking Professor Schwab what exactly it is about the meeting that is so special and so different. Professor Schwab.
Good morning. Thank you, Adrian. Of course, there are many meetings in the world. You have the G20, you have the G8, and the question is, why is Davos so successful? And I would present to you 4 reasons why Davos is different. First, it's the most comprehensive and representative meeting of global leaders. You have, of course, the politicians, and you will hear from my colleague. Most governments are represented in a strong way in Davos. You have all the heads of international organizational, regional development banks, multilateral organizations. You have the CEOs of most of the 1,000 foremost global companies. You have the heads of each major global NGO. You have, in addition, the young generation, very well integrated through our young global leaders, through our global shapers, a new category of forum communities. You have from civil society not only the NGOs, the trade unions, prominent trade union leaders. You have a cultural and religious leaders. I should also mention, of course, the intellectual dimensions, the intellectual leaders whom you have in Davos. When you look at the participants list, you will feel that the heads, the presidents of the 30 plus most renowned universities around the world are integrated. You have women leaders. So sometimes the question, how many women leaders participate? Actually, you have more than 400 women leaders, and many organizations who organize summits for women leaders would be probably jealous to have such a strong women leaders constituency. I should also add the disruptors whom we have in Davos, in technologies, the technology pioneers, and finally, very important, the media leaders. I think every 5th participant is a media leader. Now, this just reflects the nature of the World Economic Forum. It was established as a multi-stakeholder organization. We believe that the big issues in the world cannot be solved by governments, business, or civil society alone. We need a cooperative platform. So there's a second reason why Davos is different. It's the most systemic, interdisciplinary approach to the global agenda. Usually you have meetings devoted to 1 or 2 or 3 different subjects. But here in Davos, we look at all the issues on the global agenda in an interconnected way. This is, by the way, also the reason why some of the governments, or practically most of the governments, are represented by multiple ministers. I just take the example of Germany. Of course, you will hear later about the Chancellor, but there is also the Vice Chancellor for Economic Affairs, there's the Minister of Finance, there's the Minister of Social Affairs, there's the Minister of Development, and there's the Minister of Health. And Foreign Affairs. And in each of those issues, those people are engaged. So it's the most multidisciplinary meeting. Third reason why it's different, it is the most interaction-oriented meeting. Davos is not built around some stars. Everybody in Davos should be a star. We have 1,400 active roles, 1,400 active roles for participants, and there are more than 400 public and private sessions. So everybody is engaged in Davos, and that provides a very special atmosphere. Finally, Davos is different because it's not a formal decision-making meeting with communiques at the end. It is a laboratory for new ideas, actually, and a testing ground and launching pad for new initiatives. So you will see again in Davos quite a number of new initiatives. And I should add, it's an informal platform for resolving disputes. Now, what is my personal expectation for Davos this year? Number one, I hope that we can approach our global affairs with more optimism. And this is also expressed in our theme, which will be developed by my colleague Lee Howell. I hope we can recreate, again, more globalism. We had recently a preparatory meeting here of representatives of international organizations and governments. And there is a fatigue now in globalism. There is even the feeling of a possible backlash. So we want to restore this notion of global trusteeship, which is so important to address our global issues. And my third wish for Davos is that participants come back with more civic mindedness, which means feeling a greater responsibility for society as a whole. And ultimately, this means a stronger moral accountability and responsibility. Thank you.
Professor Schwab, thank you very much. I'm going to turn now to my colleague Lee Howell, who heads up the team that develops both the theme and the program. Lee, you've had to develop over 250 sessions, drawing on the talents of some 2,500 people. How have you gone about preparing this year's program for Davos?
Thanks, Adrian. We go about it really, if I want to go back to actually Professor Schwab's points around the stakeholder, bringing all the stakeholders together, and of course being multidisciplinary. And I could say that the program is developed the day after the prior year's annual meeting, but in a very systemic way where we reach out to all our communities, our members and partners, our constituents. But I would like to highlight one group. One group that's quite interesting here is our members of our Global Agenda Councils. Professor Schwab highlighted really this multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder approach to global issues. Well, we have over 1,500 experts coming from business, international organizations, national governments, universities, think tanks, et cetera. And they work together throughout the year, and serve a 2-year term, and to help build the program. First and foremost, by helping us, for example, last week we had 2 weeks ago, the launch of the Global Risk Report. They were instrumental in that, but also consulting and working with us to really reshape these issues. And I believe that there's the press gathered here today will have a chance to think of, to actually appreciate some of their thinking in a broader context with the global agenda, the outlook on the global agenda report that we have with them. We call it the Global Outlook 2013, but they're very instrumental. I just want to highlight their contribution. And of the 1,500, nearly 400 of them will be President Davos, active in these various sessions. Now, to the point about the program itself, clearly it's built around the theme, and the theme is resilient dynamism, and I would just simply express it as follows. In an interdependent world, we are facing a number of risks. We're very aware of that. They're exogenous, external. These are future shocks, and we have to be resilient. But that's not sufficient alone to get us out of it. And this is the point of the Professor Schwab and the optimism, the leadership. We do need dynamism. We need to get back onto a path of where we want to be, not where we were. In the sense of we wanted to deal with these past risks, well, that's not going to prevent, actually going to lead us to a better future. We have to actively pursue that future. And what I would express to the people around the organizing principle around this theme is a bit counterintuitive, but in order to deal with risks, you have to take risks. And I think that's what we're hoping to see is that leaders will be open to being innovative, being bolder, taking these risks, because they do have to, of course, acknowledge and address the risks that society is concerned about. And that's how we built the program. In the program, I would just say is that, as always, focusing on the global, regional, industry, but also the broader societal agenda issues. And I welcome you all to go through the program that you have with you, but I would like to highlight 3 areas, if I may, that I think would be. One is, of course, very much focused on the global economy. Some of my colleagues here will speak to that, but we do have really the top economic teams in Davos from the various countries and economies, but also from the key international organizations, along with industry, et cetera. But the key point is there is very much a focus around bringing dynamism back into the global economy, and also dealing with some of the risks that we face with respect to challenges revolving around protectionism, nationalism, populism, such that we talked about earlier. So I just want to highlight that point. The second is that we also very much focused around what's happening geopolitically. And there are a number of exciting sessions that Børge Brende will touch upon, because we do have the leaders in these regions present with us to look at what is happening in North Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, et cetera. And I just want to highlight that we're giving a lot of emphasis on the regionals this year, and we have a number of televised sessions with regional media partners. We've expanded our coverage in that sense, and I want to highlight that. And of course, third is, little known, but we spend a lot of time on innovation. We have a great assembly of scientists and technologists in Davos. And if Adrian asked me what's sort of my highlight of the program, is really around the Ideas Labs, where we work with top teams of scientists and really innovators and technologists from universities to really think about what's next that's really going to help us and change our lives in a very positive way. And I find that very inspiring, along with the fact that we have so many Nobel laureates. And I just would highlight the other one session, of course, is when we ask these Nobel laureates to really express what they think is really important in the state of the world today. So it's a very rich program, but I wanted to highlight those 3 elements just for the media here.
Thanks, Lee. Turning now to my colleague, Børge Brende. Børge, this year there's usually a strong participation by public figures, but it seems to have risen to extraordinary levels this year. Can you just talk us through exactly who's coming from the public space politically and civil society?
Thank you, Adrian. It's correct that it is unprecedented participation from governments and international organizations this year at our annual meeting. We have close to 50 head of states and governments coming to Davos, and more than 300 at cabinet level or representatives from international organizations. We know that reviving economic growth, jobless growth, the situation in Syria, but also the post-2015 agenda on the Millennium Development Goals are crucial for the international organizations, and we will have Secretary General Ban Ki-moon addressing all these questions. We will also have Madame Lagarde from IMF talking about the economic outlook for 2013, and also the quite newly elected president of the World Bank, Dr. Kim, will also be in Davos. Altogether, more than 35 international organizations will be with us. We will, of course, have a special focus on the Eurozone and Europe. Europe has been through tremendous reforms this year, and maybe even more important, one has built the framework that will secure not going into the same situation in the future. And some of the architects or the architects of this new system will be with us in Davos, with Chancellor Merkel, as Professor Schwab also mentioned. We will also have then the head of ECB, Draghi, that has played a very crucial role. We will also have Prime Minister Cameron, that is also has the presidency of G8 this year, will be in Davos. We'll also have Prime Minister Monti of Italy, that has started reforms in his country. We will have also, for example, Prime Minister Tusk from Poland. We will also have 8 EU commissioners, with Olli Rehn on the economic side, together with Finance Minister Schäuble of Germany, the French Finance Minister, Italian Finance Minister, and also the new presidency of EU this spring with the Irish Prime Minister will be there. So I think we're very well covered on Europe. Moving a little bit east, we will also have the G20 presidency of this year, represented with Prime Minister Medvedev, and key cabinet ministers and deputy prime ministers. We also have great participation from Central Asia and Caucasus, playing more and more of a strategic, geopolitically, and also economically an important role. President of Azerbaijan, we also have the President of Ukraine, and we will have also a top-notch delegation from Turkey with Deputy Prime Minister Ali Babacan, but also Foreign Minister Davutoglu that will be part of discussions on Syria and Middle East and North Africa. We have unprecedented participation from the new democracies in North Africa, sharing with Davos also the reforms that are now being undertaken with the Prime Minister of Morocco, Prime Minister of Tunisia, Prime Minister of Libya, and also the Prime Minister of Egypt with crucial cabinet ministers. We'll also, for the first time, have the Prime Minister of Lebanon sharing with us his views on the challenges in Levant, together with His Majesty the King of Jordan, the President of Israel, Shimon Peres, and also the Prime Minister of Qatar, that is playing more and more of a central role in this part of the world. Africa, 6 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world are African, and we have a lot of business interest also to invest in Africa. So it's very interesting to see that there is less focus on ODA and more on the great opportunities on this continent. 10 heads of states and government from Africa will be there to discuss the Africa agenda in a global context with President Zuma and 8 cabinet ministers from South Africa, President Goodluck Jonathan from Nigeria with 5 cabinet ministers, also with Finance Minister Ngozi. The new Prime Minister of Ethiopia will also be there, and Prime Minister Tsvangirai from Zimbabwe, that is now also facing an election in the spring. The fastest growing countries in Asia will be there in ASEAN. We have a special focus on ASEAN this year with the President of the Philippines, Prime Minister of Malaysia, Deputy Prime Minister of Thailand, Vice President of Myanmar, Deputy Prime Minister of Laos, and I could continue. Of course, after the elections in Japan that just took place, there is a lot of interest in what are the reforms being now undertaken by Prime Minister Abe and his team. On Saturday in Davos, we will have the Trade and Industry Minister, METI Minister, and also the Minister in charge of the reforms will be there to share the new agenda. We also have good Chinese participation from the central bank and also from NDRC. Davos will take place 24 hours after the inauguration in the US. We're expecting 4 cabinet-level secretaries with us in Davos, and also a strong delegation from the Hill. 7 US senators, including McCain, but also 7 representatives from the House, including Eric Cantor, the head of the majority leader in the House of Representatives. From Latin America, we will have 3 presidents and very strong delegations from the fast-growing economies of Latin America. As also Professor Schwab mentioned, we will have 40 head of civil society organizations, including the most important ones, Amnesty International, Greenpeace, Transparency International. For the first time, we have also a co-chairman of Davos that is from civil society, Huguette Lebel from Transparency International. We have faith leaders, and we also have the important labor leaders globally. And of course, all the young people representing more than 50% of the global population under age of 27, the new community of global shapers that we initiated last year, now with more than 208 hubs in 208 of the fastest growing cities in the world.
Børge, thank you very much. My colleague Alois Sfingi is now going to talk about the other side of participation in Davos. He's kindly picking up the baton from our other colleague, Robert Greenhill, who's in the front row. He has literally hot-footed it from a transatlantic flight from Geneva Airport. So he'll be available afterwards to give you some more detail on business participation. Alois is also going to fill us in on another key element of Davos, which is the forum's Open Forum, which is now in its 11th year and has become an increasingly strong interface between the forum and the global public. So can you just talk us through both business participation and that interesting Open Forum agenda?
Right. Thank you, Adrian. Well, we have heard before just how impressive the lineup will be with regards to public figures, but also other stakeholders that we always welcome in Davos. And we are actually, out of the total of 2,500 participants, we have 1,600 business leaders in Davos. About 1,000 of these 1,600 business leaders will actually be CEOs or chairs of their respective companies. We will have really a very broad representation of all different sectors of business represented, virtually all areas, different industry sectors, different service organizations will be represented in Davos. But we will also have a very good representation when it comes to geography. I think we will see a very strong presence of business leaders from Brazil, from Russia, from India, from China, from South Africa, additionally, obviously, to the strong participation that we've always seen with business leaders from Europe and from North America. I think what also is important to highlight that together with these businesses and business leaders, these members and partners, we work on projects and initiatives throughout the year. And I'd like to take the opportunity to highlight 3 initiatives that we're particularly proud of and that we've worked on the last year and that will have a particular place also this year's in Davos. The first initiative I'd like to highlight is called Grow Africa. It is something that we have launched at our African Summit in 2011, and I think it really took off last year, where towards the end of the year, the G8 countries have actually pledged a sum of $3 billion for investments in Africa. And this, the focus of that initiative is really on food security, and we will give that initiative a particular place in Davos. The second initiative is around climate change. At the Rio Plus 20 meeting, we have convened a coalition called the Friends of Rio Plus 20. And the purpose of that coalition is really to establish a fund that will enable investment in green technology in emerging markets. And we expect now to add towards this fund a sum of roughly $500 million. And also that will be a key topic in Davos. The third one, already Professor Schwab mentioned it, the gender parity topic is really important for us, and we're very proud about the participation of female leaders in Davos. Last year we launched 3 gender parity task forces in Mexico, 1 in Turkey and 1 in Japan. And we will also have a good number of sessions to that topic in Davos. Lastly, I'd like to share with you our enthusiasm around the Open Forum initiative that we've had. As Adrian said, it's the 11th year now. The Open Forum is really for the population of Davos and for the population of Switzerland. Everybody can attend these Open Forum sessions. We expect for these sessions throughout the 4 days, roughly 2,500 participants joining these sessions. And just to name a few that we believe are of particular interest this year in Switzerland and also in Europe, maybe 1 session around employment. So 1 session will be titled Unemployed or Unemployable. A second session I'd like to highlight will be around mega sports events. Switzerland is pondering a bid for Olympic Winter Games. We believe that's a very timely topic. And maybe a third example will be a session on the war against obesity. So again, the Open Forum is an event that we organize also in recognition of all the support that we have from Davos and from Switzerland.
Thanks, Alois. And just to, for those of you who are familiar with the work of the Forum, the Global Gender Gap report is an annual feature the Forum develops, which looks at the gap between men and women across the world. That's a kind of keynote part of the Forum's output, and we build on that work in Davos, and obviously it underpins our work in the area of competitiveness. Can I just turn now to Jennifer Blanke, our chief economist, just to draw out some of the other themes on the economic front that will be developed in Davos and some of the reports that will contribute to the meeting.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Adrian. In addition to the measures that Alois has just mentioned, actually the annual meeting program is going to be based in large part on a number of initiatives that were actually taking place over the course of 2012. And Alois has mentioned a few of them. I'd like to give you a few other highlights that are quite important, we think. Starting with a project that I have been actually personally involved in, the Competitiveness in Europe teams are producing a new report that we're going to be launching in Davos called Rebuilding Europe's Competitiveness. It builds on a recent book that was published by Professor Schwab, and it will be launched on Thursday, January 24th. The underlying basis and idea behind this book or this report is that when you look at Europe and you look at the financial and economic woes that the region is facing, it in large part can be traced to a competitiveness deficit in the region. And so what the report does is it identifies some of the areas where the deficit is most pronounced, and then looks at policies and practices that have already been implemented in individual European countries that, if sort of extended and implemented in other parts of Europe, would really be important in terms of providing a boost to Europe's economic prospects. Now, the report will be used in a number of sessions at the annual meeting, and bringing together leaders from all different actors, civil society, business, and government who are interested in boosting Europe's competitiveness and placing Europe on a stronger growth path. Now, Russia's competitiveness, or at least its economic prospects, is the focus of another report that we will be coming out with in Davos. And this is going to be called Scenarios for the Russian Federation. And it was developed in close cooperation with Russian industry leaders, business leaders, political leaders, but also investors and experts. And what it's based upon our very well-established scenarios methodology. And it will be looking sort of out to 2030 at what are the prospects for the Russian economy. What's quite exciting about this report is that it will be launched in a major plenary session where Prime Minister Medvedev will be there to react to the findings and also to provide his and others who are in the session their thoughts about what are the prospects for Europe's economy going forward. And of course, this session will be live streamed. Turning from regional to global issues, clearly, if you think about global trade, the world is trying to pick itself up from the inertia of the Doha round, and there's a lot of effort around the world to really, sort of push for enhanced trade around the world. Now, this has been a focus in terms of enabling trade at the World Economic Forum for a number of years. And one of the specific areas that's of particular interest is the whole concept of facilitating trade within supply chains. Now, this is important because one still sometimes thinks, perhaps not in this room, but one sometimes still thinks about trade as trade in one product that's produced in one country entirely and then shipped to one other country, whereas, of course, today, it's much more complicated than that. There are long supply chains where there are many different components or efforts made in different countries where things are shipped over multiple borders before they finally make it to the final customer. So what our team working on supply chains in the Forum has done is they have been quantifying what would be the benefits of actually reducing barriers to such supply chain trade. And this will be launched in a report called Enabling Trade, Valuing Growth Opportunities. That will be launched on Wednesday, January 23rd. And this will provide the basis for a number of sessions throughout the meeting, bringing together those people who are really interested in understanding how trade can be used to restore growth and increase prosperity around the world. Now, of course, those are a number of issues that one might expect to see at the annual meeting, but as we've already heard, civil society voices are, of course, already involved in all of these projects, and it's a very important project for the World Economic Forum to engage very closely with civil society. And so this year, we're taking this even a step further in terms of producing a major report, also based on the methodology of scenarios, called The Future Role of Civil Society. And this will be looking at how, if you look at trends in economics, technology, society, the environment, and so on and so forth, how this will change the way that civil society engages with business and government in coming up with the sorts of solutions to our collective problems around the world. So, basically, these are 4 of the reports that we'll be coming out with in Davos that will provide, the basis for discussions and also action. And I hope it does provide some sense of where some of our research priorities are right now. Thanks.
Jennifer, thank you very much. We have about 15 minutes or so for some questions. If I can ask you, when you have a question, just to identify yourself by raising your hand, telling us your name and your organization. I also have a number of colleagues in the front row who can help provide some additional support on any issues you might have, and there will obviously be time for individual interviews after this press conference ends. But can I just get a sense of who has questions in the room? Can we start with the gentleman in the corner on the right?
Yes, Dr. Schwab, this is Jamil Shade from Brazil. My question is about emerging countries. How do you see the prospect of growth in this scenario that you're looking for dynamism again, that this dynamism perhaps did not occur as much as was perhaps envisaged by some? And in the specific case of Brazil, it was a very low growth this year. What does this show? That perhaps the growth was overestimated?
Thanks for that. And can I just take the question from the person in the middle there, had the hand up? Gentleman just there. Yeah.
Dmitry Chefilia, Russian news agency TASS. If there is some special meaning of this special session of Russian scenarios, why it was planned for this year, if there is some problems with Russian economics, or could you tell your reasons, please?
Okay, well, Russia obviously has the G20. Bulga, can you just perhaps address that issue on Russia and the importance of Russia and the Russian scenarios work?
So in the summer, we agreed with Russian government, but also with our key stakeholders in Russia, the young global leaders, the global shapers, and the business communities, that we were to develop different scenarios for Russia moving forward post the presidential elections. So we developed these 3 scenarios on the economic development of Russia in close collaboration also with Russian professors and academics. And in October, we had a very well-attended roundtable in Moscow where we brainstormed around these 3 scenarios, where we had also Prime Minister Medvedev, 3 deputy prime ministers, and also cabinet ministers there, together with the international business community. And based on the outcome of this meeting, we will now present these 3 scenarios in the presence of Prime Minister Medvedev in Davos, and we will then have an interactive discussion on Russia moving forward, now as a WTO member, and all the opportunities, but also the challenges that this vast continent is facing.
Thanks. On specific country issues, I would just refer you, obviously, to the Global Competitiveness Report, which basically details in very great detail the specifics that the forum identifies as being drivers and deficits in different economies' competitiveness. And that's really, if you like, the answer that the forum has in those terms. Sir?
Adrian, coming back to your question, but before doing so, I just want to add, related to Russia, I think there's a special interest on Russia next year as being in the chair of the G20. And as it had become a tradition, starting with the Koreans, the French, the Mexicans, Davos will be some kind of a launching pad for the G20 agenda. So the Russians, a very strong Russian delegation, is actually related to two purposes. First, to discuss the scenario, and second, also to present the Russian ideas about the objectives for the G20 next year. If we look at the developing countries or the emerging markets, I think we are very proud that over the years, starting very early, we always, being a multi-stakeholder organization, have given great room to the integration of emerging countries. As an economist, I have to say, your question, coming back to your question, low growth and so on, of course there's a concern whether those emerging countries may be caught in a trap, the middle income trap, as I don't want to develop it further. But let's not forget, next year, or this year actually, 2013, despite the crisis, the prognosis is around 4% global growth. If we take just below 4%, hopefully more. If we look at where is the global growth coming from? Still mainly from the emerging countries, from the BRIC countries. But we should not forget all the next followers group behind the BRIC countries. I mean, Philippines, we have the president, by the way, of the Philippines in Davos. Indonesia and so on. So the emerging countries are very important for global growth.
Just following up on that side of the house, gentleman in the front, gentleman in the middle, and gentleman just at the back there. We can take those three.
Hello, Marat Czargorowski from Geneva. Professor Schwab, thank you very much for inviting us.
Can you just tell us your
Marat Czargorowski from Geneva, yeah, here.
From which publication?
Actually, independent journalists are working for different publications, okay. Yeah. Regular guest here as well. I noticed that the main theme of this meeting is resilient dynamism. So what I know of resilience, it's rather a psychological term, and which has been made recently very popular here by a professor called Boris Cyrulnik. You certainly heard of him. Maybe even invite him. I haven't seen him in the list, but I mean, here you are sitting on the chair. I would imagine, do you see yourself as a shrink, if I may say so, to the global economy? And I saw that Professor Kahneman is going to... Psychiatrist, yeah. Professor Kahneman, Nobel Prize laureate, he's great, he's going to speak. Maybe you have some more conference on that, if you can comment. And another, what I was appealed by the co-chairs, actually, there are two chairmen of companies, like Coca-Cola. You're talking, Alois Swing, you said about obesity. Well, Coca-Cola even admitted now, recently, that they were part of the obesity problem, especially in the US. And also chairman of the UBS. UBS, as you know, has been convicted recently in many different affairs, paying billions of fines. So is it for you like a step forward to tell them, listen, guys, now you have to do better? Or I don't know how you explain that.
Thanks for that. I think there's two questions, probably enough to be more than food for thought. Gentleman just behind.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you for taking my question. I'm Hiro Maegawa. I'm working for the Asahi Shimbun, Japanese newspaper. And I have a question in general. As Mr. Howell said, how do we get back to the path? And if you look at all these theme of resilience dynamism, what do you mean by getting back? Would that mean more growth or more something else? Because we all know that the world economy's driver is from emerging economy and possible developing countries. But who has raised in a developed world like me, it looks a little bit grim. And how the developed world could cope with the world dynamism that we see less growth. Thank you.
Okay, and there's just a gentleman at the back of the middle.
My name is David Eberly. I work for Daily here in Geneva, Tribune de Genève. Mr. Schwab, you're very optimistic about Europe but in a way, Europe is also a catastrophe, unable to reform itself. Do you think that Europe is going to save? What are the drivers that are going to save Europe? Is it Europe itself, or Russia, or the BRICS, or the outside? And you mentioned also a very high participation from Germany, for example, but France just sends one minister to Davos. Are you disappointed by that?
Okay, there's a couple of questions there. Just to start back at the beginning, you've spoken before, I know, about Davos as a kind of therapy for world leaders and for CEOs. Do you want to just expand on that perhaps slightly, sir?
No, it's very clear the world economy is based, and the future of the world economy is based on restoring trust in leaders, restoring trust in our future. And this means we have to develop again, we have to move out of this crisis mood, which is amplified by the media also. We have to look, what is the longer-term future? What is the longer-term future? And coming back to your other remark, I mean, certainly Mr. Axel Weber deserves praise, as well as the chairman of Coca-Cola, for doing now the necessary things. Coming to the question of our Japanese, I would refer to my colleagues here.
Yeah, and I think just on that point, I mean, Davos, as we say, often is a place where people have to confront other interests and other stakeholders and actually interact with them, and that, we think, is one of the most important aspects of the meeting. Lee, just...
I think on that last point that you raised about the path, I think indeed growth is important, but what you'll see through the program is there are some conditions of this future growth that we aspire for, and those are around its sustainability and its equity. It's not just pure GDP growth, it's a growth that is indeed sustainable and, of course, is equitable. And I think that is very much in the program, and it's part of the dimensions of the conversations around what to do to get back on track. But I think it does go back to the fundamental point about indeed there are a lot of challenges, but we can't be paralyzed, process through analysis of these challenges, but indeed take some bold steps, and we're starting to see that. And I think this is the moment really to do one thing, and that is at least have a shared definition of the problem, because you can get to a shared solution. And all of these issues on the global agenda are indeed impacting across all stakeholders, and they are multidisciplinary. So you have to have that prerequisite dialogue to at least define it together so that you can actually solve it together.
I think too, Jennifer, just to bring you in here, you identified a couple of reports that are launching in Davos which are really addressing that pessimism and giving a more optimistic potential outlook.
Yeah, I mean, based on whether countries actually do what they need to do, because I think that what we see is that very often countries actually know what needs to be done in order to improve their growth prospects, but then somehow they can't get it done because it's very difficult to make the reforms, to make the changes that are necessary. And so I think I would say we're sort of addressing this in two ways at Davos. Number one, just through this multi-stakeholder dialogue, getting all the different voices around the table and talking about it and saying, especially in Europe, but elsewhere as well, we know what we need to do, how are we going to do this together, because generally one actor can't do it on its own. Another one, as I'd mentioned, is the fact that we do see things that have been done elsewhere. We do see that certain countries have been able to implement reforms and investments in the sorts of activities that do jumpstart them. So what we hope to do, and more going forward, but also at the annual meeting, is to put together those experiences and inspire countries and regions from the sorts of experiences that have been seen elsewhere.
Thanks very much. And just to address the point, Bolger, on French representation, we have a very, very strong French business representation and, of course, across civil society, academia. Do you want to just...
Yeah, and there is the key interest now in France is how France is addressing the necessary reforms. And I think we have the two very relevant ministers in that respect. We have the finance minister and also the innovation minister. So them sharing their agenda on these issues is very important. The same is also for Japan, as I mentioned, the new cabinet, and with the Abe in economics, we'll have the finance, we will have then the METI minister, the economy and trade minister, and also the minister now in in charge of reforms will be with us in Davos. So I think there will be key findings coming out of this. And on the Eurozone in general, I would say that we should not underestimate the reforms being now undertaken. Some of the periphery countries are now turning deficits into surpluses. We're also seeing that the labor unit costs are falling quite dramatically. And hopefully this will also then result in more substantial growth at the end of 2013, something that also the board of ECB said they were hopeful for at their last board meeting when they decided to keep the interest rate at the same level as before Christmas.
Thank you. Lee?
I was just going to say that we also have a great opportunity for the regions that we mentioned to have sessions that we've built in partnership, and these sessions will be broadcast in those countries. For example, we're working with NHK on a session that will be, of course, aired in Japan. We're actually doing this for the first time in France, even also in Africa, et cetera, in other countries and regions. So I just want to point out that I think there's a lot to Jennifer's point, where there's things happening in other parts of the world where we can actually have those discussions, but then and channel the insights and really the innovations and share them across borders.
Thank you. We're coming to the end of the session, but I just try and squeeze in some questions from the back of the room, just working backwards to the middle, if we can. And I know, being a former journalist, one loves to ask more than one question, but if we can just keep them very brief, that'd be great.
Thank you. I'm Gabriela Sotomayor from Mexican News Agency. Mr. Schwab, did you invite to Davos the candidates that are contending to lead the WTO? And I would like to know if they are going. And in your view, which are the characteristics that the new director of WTO should have? Thank you.
Question on the WTO.
Mr. Schwab, my name is Ravi Kant. I represent Washington Trade Daily and Economic and Political Weekly. You have stated three major wishes from this meeting, namely global platform for optimism, global trusteeship, civic-mindedness, feeling the greater responsibility and moral accountability. All these three wishes are primarily coming because the economic model that we have followed over the last 30, 40 years have failed to generate these three main traits that now you want to see sort of committed to in this meeting. Thank you.
And your question is? Yes, the question, but you just made a statement. Is there a question?
I have not made a statement. I said, Mr. Schwab, you stated three wishes.
Yes.
And these three wishes, have they come because of the failure of the economic model?
Okay, thank you for that. Sorry, my apologies. It's my hearing. Gentleman in the middle. Just there with his hand up. Okay.
Simeon Bennett from Bloomberg News. Mr. Schwab, you said that there is a fatigue with globalism now, even a backlash. Can you just expand on what you meant by that and what you think the signs of that are? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And then just finally, gentleman just in the middle there.
Professor Schwab, Tom Miles from Reuters News Agency. I wondered what risk you see from the world awash with easy money courtesy of central banks. I don't think this was really touched upon in the risk report, but is there a risk of markets mispricing? Are there signs of markets mispricing risk now and risk of inflation reviving? And also on a question on the participants. In the last few years, there's a sense of some participants sort of lying low, staying away because of contrition, because of the financial crisis. But I mean, although corporate scandals have continued, you're reporting a rush back to Davos. Do you think that sense of humility and contrition among the plutocracy has disappeared? Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. Just on the WTO point, we respect and love other international organizations, but being an impartial organization, we don't tend to comment on choices for those particular roles. Can I just ask you, sir, about the sense of fatigue and that point on Davos this year, and is it responding to perhaps a sense of failure in previous years in the global economy?
Yes. I mean, you just have to look at the facts. Look at the outcome of the Qatar meeting on environment. Look where we stand with the world trade negotiations. Study some of the communiques of the G8 and G20 over the last years and look at the progress made. So it's a fact that in some way we are blocked in terms of making progress on addressing the real global issues in a collaborative way. There are small steps which we achieved, but it looks that countries with the economic crisis have become much more egoistic again, more nationalistic, and this, of course, creates a situation where everybody tries to optimize nationally the situation, which means a sub-optimalization on a global level. Just to come back to the question from over here, the Forum always had the philosophy that it is entrepreneurship which drives economic and social progress, economic development and social progress. So I don't think we have to change drastically the model of economic growth. We have to improve it, and we have to put back at the center entrepreneurship.
Thank you. I would just say, Tom, regarding participation, just looking at some of those key elements, it's actually remained remarkably consistent from financial services and banking over the past 5 years. I think looked at those numbers. But I think you can see this year from the presence of Huguette Labelle as co-chair, and also if you look at the work that I know doesn't necessarily always catch people's attention as a headline, but the work we do on our Partnering Against Corruption initiative and the way that the Global Competitiveness Report stresses transparency and good governance as really key drivers of national competitiveness. You know, the Forum's history in this respect is a very strong one in terms of emphasizing the ways in which those elements can really improve both corporate, business, and national, and therefore global competitiveness.
Adrian, I just want to come back rapidly to the question related to the financial situation. That's exactly why I'm looking forward to go myself to Davos. There are so many issues where we do not yet know the answers. Like the question you raise, will we go into an inflationary environment? So I'm looking forward to Davos to discuss with those present and to shape afterwards my own opinion. And after the meeting, I hope to give you a very qualified answer.
And you just, Lee, you were the editor of the Global Risk Report.
Exactly.
So
well, I'm not allowed to pick my favorite session, but one is related to this, and we will have a debate. A forum, we'll have a debate in Davos around really what is looking at the near-term and the long-term impact of this sort of bold, innovative monetary policy that we're seeing in parts of the world. And that will be a very much one of the first debates we have in Davos.
Great. We look forward to seeing as many as possible of you as we can there. Thank you for being with us this morning. For everyone watching, I hope you'll be able to follow up on the website. Thanks, everyone, and we'll be able to do individual interviews after this. So thanks to all of you again. Thanks to my colleagues.
Thank you.